explains why in a second. I really like whoever came up with the idea on the post there. It says, come to worship, leave to what? Serve. And that's Christ's example, is to serve and help others. And would somebody like to read Genesis 12:3? Just raise your hands, whoever want to read it. Genesis 12:3. Alicia?
Genesis 12:3 says, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
When we serve and help other people, we are actually blessing them, aren't we? In the Lord Jesus' ministry, he came to save and to what? Serve. And so I just want to share some of these. Some of you may have seen a few of these already, but this is benevolence, serving self above, serving others before self, above self is really benevolence. And I'm supposed to go this way. Okay. Have you seen people beg before? This little girl was just haven't eaten for a while. And this is in an orphanage in South Vietnam. Just to give you an idea. It wasn't very far from our army base. And some of the soldiers says, we don't like these little kids, walking around in dirt floors and everything else. So what they did was they went and put a cement floor in the orphanage. And then they also built these little individual beds. Now some of you, do you recognize what these poles are like? Those are tent posts. So they were very creative. They used tent posts to build little beds for these orphans. And I was a medic there. I was there for 13 and a half months. I'm not bragging, okay? I was there for 13 and a half months. Actually, I had my master's degree in biology, and I was on my way to Oregon State University to get my PhD in oceanography, and then I got my draft notice. And I had a friend at a time said, my father has 20 acres in Vancouver Island. You're welcome to stay there until the war is over. That was tempting, wasn't it? British Columbia is very nice to begin with, right? I said, well, I'll come and visit after the war is over, but I need to serve my country. So I ended up going to, I would like to visit one of these days. Have you heard of San Antonio, Texas before? Yeah. That's where in this country it's very special, okay? Not everybody is forced to carry a weapon, you know what I mean? And the way our evidence believe that, we're willing to go out in combat, but we don't want to be carrying a weapon necessarily. We want to be medics, okay? And so I went to Fort Sam Houston there. Yeah, Fort Sam Houston, and so that's where I did my medical training, okay? Wow. And stayed there, and while I'm not trying to brag, okay, but while I was going through my training, I got the highest scores and everything. And so they asked me, would you like to stay here and help us teach the medics that are coming through? I said, of course. My parents would be so happy I wouldn't have to go to Vietnam, So the day came when they assigned us, when we graduated, and they said, okay, Private so-and-so, Vietnam, Private so-and-so, Washington, D.C., and then they got to me and they said, Private Ezbon Jen, Vietnam. I said, what? I thought I was supposed to stay here and teach. But meanwhile, I already told my parents that I was going to be teaching in Fort Sam Houston, you know. And I had to be creative. Unfortunately, I had to lie about it. Because when they told me, I was going to be there to teach, I rented a room there with an address and everything else, and I would, tell them that's where I'm living. And then the biggest lie, believe it or not, the biggest lie that I never told was that I went to Vietnam. My mother and father did not know I went to Vietnam because they went through so much misery in their life. Okay, like my father, he named himself Job after he became a Christian. He went through so much. I never met her, but I have an older 5-year-old sister that died at age 5. Okay, and they went through a lot of trauma there, and they barely escaped, Hong, because what happened was during the, I like to use the word imperial Japanese occupation. When they took over Hong Kong, the Chinese spies told them that my father is a U.S. citizen, okay, and so they were looking for him. Like in the middle of the night, they would smash down the door to look for him, and so it was very traumatic for my sister and my mother and everything else, and so I didn't want them to go through any more trauma, so I just didn't tell them I was going to Vietnam. And some of my friends said, you don't want them tell me you're going to Vietnam? What happens if something happened to you? I said, if I tell them I'm going to Vietnam now, they're going to be worrying about me every day I'm there. But let's say if I got killed over there, at least it'd be only one-time deal, So you may not agree with the way you think, but at that time, that was the way I was thinking, okay. And so I ended up going to Vietnam. I needed to serve, and let's see, I'm pointing this way, okay. So while I was there, I asked my person who was in charge of my platoon, I said, can I treat the civilians? And he said, of course, we're here to be their friends, we're here to be their friends, we're not here, So I was able to take care of, treat people that needed help, that needed it. And some of you probably say, well, that guy doesn't know what he's doing because he doesn't have any gloves on, okay? Because I only need gloves if there's, the cut, whatever, and slash and so forth. And so, like little sister would bring a big sister would bring little sister when we're going through a village, and I would, figure out what is happening and work on them. And here, they're just standing in line here to have me work on them. And some of you may not believe this, but I used to have black hair, okay. Really? Yeah. And so so the kids really, they enjoy coming up and getting treated and whatever else. So we went through villages, and this is the older sister brought a little younger brother over here, so I took care of him here. And here, and then our soldier here, this is not me, okay, but this is at a camp. We were at the South Vietnamese government asked us to put a little tiny camp and be there for a while because the Viet Cong were really harassing the villagers in that area. So we stayed in that area, and our soldiers, like I said, really, they always treated, the kids well. And so they would, when we were having dinner, the kids can come and we would give them what? They could fill up their plates for them. And they, they're not afraid. She has a mouthful of food there. Looking up. Let's see here. See something? Did I turn something off? Okay, let me go here. I think it's not moving. Okay, yeah, you can move them from here. I want to. And back in those days, it didn't matter if you had a PhD or if you're a high school dropout. They would draft you. You know what I mean? And so I think it was very fair. It's just not like the educated people could exclude the draft, you know what I'm saying? And the reason I'm showing this to you, at our base camp, there was a soldier who was an architect. And he asked the commanders, can I design a chapel so that our brothers can worship there that believe, you know? And so he designed this chapel. And then there were enough people that, you know, soldiers that were builders that could build this. So this was designed by soldiers and built by soldiers. And so that's where we worshiped. And so we were able to go there and worship. Okay, next. And this is in the helicopter, okay? So we're going over, and the reason why they said we should go to Vietnam was because China was really, really bad back then. They said if South Vietnam falls, then Thailand would be the next country to fall, and they're going to take care of all Asia, okay? And so we're on a helicopter, the helicopters would take it out where we will go on our patrols. And I won't mention the person's name here, but she did say, how come you have a handicap placard? I said, well, ever tried jumping off helicopters with a 60-pound pack on your backpack? You know, kind of hard on the knees, right? Yeah. So when I came back, you know, after service, you know, I didn't get it right away. Then I was just figured my knees were bothering me, so they gave me doctors said, well, I want you to have a placard, you know, in your car, so you don't have to walk so far. So I didn't complain. Next, please. And this is much later. He came back from Vietnam, and just want to tell you what's going on here. But before, this is during my time in Vietnam. My best friend basically said, I don't think you want to be a dentist. You'll get bored just sitting, drilling teeth all day long and doing all that. And, you know, it says, you have attention deficit, you know. So I said, I agree with you. And he said, what would you recommend? And he said, well, there's a school of public health they just started here. And I said, what's public health? I've never heard of public health before. You know, this is, to let you know, this is 1969, okay? And so they sent me some stuff and say, that looks kind of interesting. So what I did was I applied and got in to Loma Linda. But before I get here, I just want to say that we need to serve, okay? We need to serve our friends. We need to take care of our friends, take care of our church members, take care of people in our community. And so when can you imagine, I was there for 13 and a half months, was shot at and everything else. My guardian angels, I was not wounded, okay? Because I could hit the ground pretty fast. And I was, I'm thinner, I'm not, thinner at the back. I was thinner. And then I had I'm not going to show you, I have an Asian genetic superiority. You know what that is? I have a flat butt and they couldn't shoot it. Okay, I'm not going to show you, okay? So I learned how to crawl really well under, flat on the ground. They did try shooting me, okay? They did try shooting me, sure, and they couldn't. They never did hit me, okay? I never got it. Sometimes when you watch these movies, it kind of messes things up for you when you look at it, and you see people getting up and running. You never get up and run. You get shot so fast, okay? So you learn to crawl. So I'm a really good crawler. You ask my wife, I could crawl around very much. No. But when the war was over, but no, before that, I just want to tell you one thing, how the Lord has blessed us, okay? Our inner brain, when you help other people, okay? When you help other people, you increase your neurotransmitters. Okay? Your neurotransmitter, when you help other people, your neurotransmitters increases. And so, and when you increase, you feel better. You know what I mean? You don't get stressed out. Follow what I'm saying? And I have to tell you that one time we were on a patrol. It was a long patrol, and we got tired. And finally, the platoon leader said, "Let's take a break." And next thing I knew, I laid down near the trail, and next thing I knew, I always just, fell asleep right away. The next thing I knew was somebody was shaking me. He said, "Doc, wake up, wake up." I said, "What's wrong?" I didn't hear any gunshots or anything. They said, "Oh no, it's not that. It's the ARVN." ARVN means Army of the Republic of South Vietnam. He says, "An ARVN soldier's arm is pretty bad, So I got up and looked out, unwrapped the bandage, and it was just big slash, and it was bleeding and everything else. And I still like to wear this, but in Vietnam, a medic carried cocaine, a vial. Okay, so we inject that to kill the pain. So what I did was I got up and I injected him, and then I kind of cut out some of the dead stuff, and then I used antibiotics, cleaned out the fluid, cleaned it out, and then I sutured him, sewed them together, and I put more antibiotics on top of that, and I wrapped him up, and then I gave him some pills, antibiotic pills to take back, and when I was all done, you know what he did? He did this. And you talk about neurotransmitter. Remember I told you how tired I was? Yes. I was no longer tired because my neurotransmitter just increased. So Lord understands, when you help other people, indirectly you're also rewarding yourself, okay? But you're actually helping other people. And so when I came back to Loma Linda, all the students, back then they had, when you come in, they check you out, check out your blood pressure, Loma Linda, School of Public Health there. They check out your blood pressure, they checked, your height and weight and all that, and they also checked your cholesterol level. And they had to check it again because it blew the whole school away. Okay, I'm not bragging. I was there in Vietnam for 13 and a half months. I was shot at and everything else. And guess what? I had the lowest cholesterol level of all the entering students, U.S. students that weren't overseas. See what the Lord can do when you're helping other people, you're also helping yourself. Okay, they couldn't believe I had the lowest cholesterol level because when you're under shock and a lot of pressure, your cholesterol level goes up as well. Okay, so when I came back to Loma Linda, since I had my master's already, and I came back to Loma Linda, and then since I had a lot of experience in doing things, organizing things like that, they said, Loma Linda School said that we've been contacted by some a mission clinic way up in Mexico. Can you help coordinate RN? How many of you heard of any Hispanic folk? Heard of Chiapas before? You heard of Chiapas? So there's a little clinic, Adventist clinic here in Chiapas, Mexico. Okay, and they said they really need help there. They really need to have, volunteer dentists and volunteer dentists, dental students, nurses, and so forth to go there and help out for a week or so to help the people out. Okay, next. So they were just waiting to be seen here. And here, okay, see, how do you like the dental chairs, you guys? No, seriously. The only way we could get up to this place is so isolated is by little tiny airplanes. They flew us up there, okay, so we couldn't carry dental chairs or anything else. So we have two these are two dental hygiene, no, these are two dental students, okay. And they were working on these patients, but we had, anesthesia and everything else. You could see we have 2x2s and so forth. But look at that, dental chair, Okay, next. It's good to get students involved with the mission work in here. And this is the dentist here. You have to have it. You can't just send a dental students, okay? You have to have at least one dentist to kind of supervise them. And so this is the dentist here, and he's working on patient. Can you imagine working on a patient when there's so many people there, watching? At least they're saying there's no pain. And then, see the dentist, his son there, you see him on the left side there? He's being a good example. He's actually indirectly training his son to be what? To be helpful, to help other people. Make sense? Okay, next. And this is just a further view of it. People are just waiting there to be seen. Next. And in that mission, they have you see this picture of Jesus Christ there. Next. And here, the mother's being seen, so daddy's what? Taking care of the kids, right? While the mama's being seen. They don't want to leave their kids at home by themselves, okay? So they bring them and they just sit out there and they wait, and the mother's being worked on. Next. And this is what I'm telling you, this is still there in Chiapas. It's a different type of area. You see how that's the way most kids dress there. That's the type of, that's the way they dressed back in those days. It's a very remote area, right? So here we're still working on patients. Next. Now, does this kid look like a Mexican baby? No. Okay, by this time, I finished my doctorate in public health, and Loma Linda University School of Public Health. They submitted, the U.S. State Department submitted proposals. They went different places, different organizations to write a grant and propose a plan to what they can do. So, guess what? Loma Linda University, we beat out all the top universities in the world, okay, and the USA. And our job was to make a difference in Tanzania, which is in East Africa, okay. And the grant was from USAID, University Agency for International Development, but guess what happened recently? The president, I'm not trying to be political here, but the president of the United States got rid of the Agency for International Development, okay? Development is the American program that provides foreign aid to other, severely poor countries, okay? And so what happened, the reason here is can you imagine if you want to have kids? The number one killer was measles, okay? And then out of 10 babies that were born, 2 died before their age 5, and about 3 died before and 3 were malnourished. So that didn't leave very much, right? And so they said, we want you folks to come up with the grant was, they told us, and we came up with a solution. And so we were awarded, we got this huge grant. And basically fits Ellen White's concept, right? And basically what it was, okay, we said we're going to, or what we got awarded the grant because was our proposal, said we want to build 23 educational centers, health training centers in this country, in the rural poor areas, okay, 23. And we're going to train healthcare special type of healthcare workers. And so, In these training centers, we had a classroom, we had a little dormitory where the women could stay, and then we had a cafeteria where they could be eating, okay? So they didn't have to worry about their food or anything. And then we also we built a little tiny clinic where they can practice, okay? So we took in about 24 students from the local area, okay, and it was a 2-year program, and they learned how to vaccinate, okay, they know how to provide nutritional education, health education, and they were also taught how to, everything in between. They were also taught how to deliver babies, okay? And then they also knew when it was a complex case, when they have to ask, when to refer. So part of the program is that you have to weigh these kids to see how much, are they the proper weight for their age? You know what I mean? So this guy looks pretty healthy here. Next. Now this guy didn't like to be weighed, right? So because they didn't like to be weighed here, so he was screaming. Okay, you see how different personalities are. And we had a chart there. You notice that if they're weighed on a regular basis, okay, like every month. And so if it's green, if their weight is in the green, that means they're in a good zone. If this is yellow here, that means you need to keep track of them. And then if it's red, they need help right away. Okay? Next, please. And this is what we did. Went to different villages. See, we just hung this scale there and then put the kids in here, okay? And then the parents are here. The parents bringing their kids. Next, please. And then, like I said, this is a school. This is where we trained the healthcare workers in Tanzania. And, it's a good place, nice desks, everything else, okay? And next. And then this outside this complex, and what we did was what? We taught the students to grow what? Healthy vegetables, and so they grew green vegetables like this, and then also, this is not just for them to eat necessarily. They do eat it, okay, but this is also a what? Example. This is to encourage the villagers to grow healthy vegetables to eat them, okay? We didn't grow chickens or anything like that, okay? This is all true veggie stuff.
Is that kale?
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like kale anyway. We found things that would grow in those areas, okay? Next. And you see there, mothers bringing her kids over there to clinic. They consider it such a privilege to go to the clinic that they wear their best clothing to go to the clinic because they felt that they were treated so well. Next. And yes, this is the safari there, okay? They had this country, Tanzania, they had the safaris where they protected, they had animals there and they protected them, okay? They were there. And so this shows you, okay, any parents or potential parents to be. Mother elephant is teaching baby elephant what? To eat grass, okay? The baby is no longer nursing, okay? It has to eat grass now. And so, next. Now, sometimes you can't believe everything you hear, okay? What is that?
Sleeping in the tree.
No, I thought we were taught that lions cannot climb trees.
Every now and then you come across a lion who has not read
So I was driving around. I wanted to take some pictures, and then I wasn't afraid of lions because they're not supposed to climb trees, So I was just walking around taking pictures. Then I kind of looked up and I noticed there was a lion up there. I said, "Wowee!" I better slowly get back into my car and not panic. Do you know why the lion didn't jump down and eat me, Andrew? Because I'm a vegetarian, and vegetarians don't taste very good to lions. Okay? So you just have to be careful, okay? You just can't take everything for granted because, whoever thought about lion could climb a tree that high? Okay. Next, please. Okay, now I'm back to Loma Linda again and then after Loma Linda, I just said, I'm getting tired of Southern California here. I'm going to move up north, okay? And so this is much later than I took the dean position at Santa Rosa Junior College, and then and some people came up to me and said, we don't have a dental hygiene program here in this region. So I said, no problem, let's try our best to get it going, okay? So believe it or not, we got a dental hygiene program going at Santa Rosa Junior College, okay? Of course, we couldn't have one until you have to have a clinic there to train the students, right? So we didn't have those. We were sort of like, when I went there, it's one of the top, nowadays it's one of the top 5 colleges in California, in top 15 in the USA, okay, it gives you an idea. But when I got there, like the nursing program, they were in a big trailer, and then the dental assisting program was in another trailer. They're all over the trailers in different places, okay? And then we had X-ray tech, in a trailer, and I said, this is crazy, So I told the president, I said, I think we need to build a new building. We need to have a complex, a single building to put all these programs together. And which means we have to have a dental clinic and a nursing clinic, a clinical training site, right? And so we talked about it, and then he kind of listened to me. He listened to me, and then he says, yeah, let's try to do that. And we didn't have bond issues back then. So he says, let me see if I can borrow some money to build this building, okay? And we were able to communicate fairly well. You know why? We had the same birthdays, except he was just 1 year older than me. And also because he was a civil engineer. He's a civil engineer. He's a mechanic. No, he's an electrical engineer. And I told him about my father. Before I told him about my father, he knew my father was a civil engineer. So so I knew how to communicate with him. And so we got along pretty well. And so he went out, and we were able to borrow the money and build this new building at Santa Rosa. And shows, I drove to different schools to see what kind of health buildings they had. And I, being who I am, I said, I want to have a health complex that's better than all those other schools that which you consider good. And so we worked with an architect, and we did build the raised building. Let me just talk about that, okay? And So I said, we want to help our brothers and sisters, not just in our own region. We want to go somewhere else. And so I said, right here, I took dental hygiene students, and this is what we use for Soul Clang Startup. Okay, took dental hygiene students and some nursing students, and you probably recognize that trailer. And so I packed everything there, and she's a nurse, she's a dental hygiene instructor, and her husband here is a dentist, okay, and we have to have a dentist there, so he's volunteered to go with us. And so this is in a migrant work camp here. So we provided free dental work, okay, for various regions in Baja California. You heard of Ensenada before? In that area, okay, we did it in orphanages, we did migrant work camps and so forth. And so it's not like we had qualified people to supervise and everything else. And these students are not first year students, these are second year students. And then there was another area, there was a church there, not Adventist church, but a church there. And they had all concrete, so they had the concrete area there, and I asked them, can we set up a little clinic here? And they said, of course you can, And so we did that also. We would spend like 2-3 days in one location and 2-3 days in another location, okay, so we can see as many people as we can. And then, she's nursing. She was a nurse then, but she's currently, a charge nurse now in Santa Rosa. So sometimes kids just didn't feel very good, so they would talk to them, and figure out what's going on. You notice that we also we measure how tall they are here and how much they weigh. Next, please. And the kid's feeling a little better. Okay, next. So our teacher skills how to interact, and here, you see where everything's proper here. Okay, and this is a dental hygiene. And this is a friend, this assistant that does the suction. Okay, and these are all replaceable. We change them after every patient. Next, please. And do they allow that in this country? Because they wanted, yeah, they don't allow it in this country, but I'll let them get away with it, you see. See, this way, the only thing that's good, her children would just see what's going on, and mother's not screaming or anything, so they're not going to be afraid of future dental work, right? And see, everything's clean, everything's with these special lighting and everything else. She's wearing contact, these protective glasses, and so we're not skimping any. Okay, next. And now this is inside an orphanage here, okay, and we're working inside an orphanage here. And when we sterilize all the instruments too, Next. Yes.
Are you still in the United States here or else?
No, this is still in Ensenada. Okay. And then we have nursing student outside just reading to the other kids. They're there, trying to talk about health and prevention. Next. And then, can you imagine this is your house? I'm serious. This is your house here, okay? And when our students saw some of these houses like that, they said, this is horrible that people have to live like this. And they said, we'd like to do something while we're here, just even if it's only for a week or so, or 2 weeks. Okay, back, I'm sorry.
That was you.
Well, me? It worked?
You've been moving it for a while.
Okay, this one, right? Yeah, here we are. So our students said, We don't have a lot of money, but we want to use what money we have. We want to go to a large grocery store and buy food and other things, or blankets or whatever else. We want to give it to these folks in this complex here. So that's what our students did. These are like dental hygiene students and nursing students. They're still students, okay? Can you see what happens when you expose people, when you expose them to situations they haven't seen before? How they're willing to what? Help other people, right?
Yes.
How they're willing to bless other people. And so, okay, I'm going to try. And then, these kids feel very comfortable with us. And then somebody brought this kid to me. Like, people always bring things to me, and expect me to resolve them. Okay. They brought this kid to me. Can you fix this guy?
What is it?
Well, you doctors here, you could figure it out. It's a major type of work. Okay. They brought this kid to me, and I looked at it and I said, definitely we want to help him. So the person that I became friends with, he's a pediatric surgeon in Ensenada, okay. And so I brought this kid to him and his mother to him, and I said, can you work on him? And he says, I'm a pediatric surgeon, but I'm not capable of providing enough help for this larger thing. And he says, what I'll do is I'll have him come and stay in my hospital. He owns his hospital because his uncle was one of the 2 richest guys in the city of Ensenada, and he built this hospital and put his nephew in charge of this hospital. So he took he and his mother there, and then after that we had to go back to the USA. And then later on I called him and said, how did it go? He says, it went well. And I said, when did it go back? He said, well, we did not release him from the hospital for 2 weeks. I said, how did they pay for that? Guess what he said? We didn't charge him anything. The kid stayed there for 2 weeks in the hospital, food and everything else, didn't charge him. Because what? Because he was a friend of mine. And also because he realized what it is to kind of help other people. And so he got a plastic surgeon to, put the skin, from different location back and so forth, and help this kid.
What was that?
Pardon me?
What is that?
Some type of weird wart. The doctor should know. No, it's just overgrown. It's just grown out of proportion. And talking about serving, because he was, like I said, he was in charge. He was the administrator of the largest private hospital in Ensenada, and he wasn't really in touch with some of this stuff at all. And then I still remember we go there like every summer, but I still remember the second time we were there and we were ready to leave, and what happens is, what he does is he has a little dinner for us, the night before we leave. And during the dinner, he shocked us all when he said this. Guess what he said? We want to thank you folks from Santa Rosa for showing us, making us more aware of our own poor people. Because they were, top 2%. They didn't interact with the poor people. So by getting him involved with us, he actually thanked us for getting him involved in helping the poor people in his own community. So service, right? Not going on. And so we're just working in another clinic, another migrant work camp. Okay, we're helping out the students. Next. And then these are not hygiene students, these are nursing students. They're reading to these kids here. You know what's ironic? What do you see in the background in this migrant work camp? Coke. These poor people, they have these Coke machines there, okay? No, I'm not going to put you folks on the spot here, okay? You don't have to raise your hands. How many of you drink Coca-Colas? No, you don't have to raise your hands, okay? Tell you what, most people don't know this, okay? But what it does when you drink Coca-Cola, the colas have a certain amount of acid there that can take the enamel off your teeth, okay? So I'm just saying, if you're addicted to colas, which is, I'm not saying you shouldn't drink colas, okay? But if you drink them, make sure you what? You rinse your mouth with water, okay? Well.
But it also leaches calcium out of your cells and it doesn't end at your teeth.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, I'm just telling you, it's better not to drink it, is what the point we're making, but if you insist on it. Okay, next, please. And, you know, this, you look at that guy.
Who is that?
Wow. Yeah, with a lot of hair.
I still have hair, it's not my fault, but it's gray.
At least you have some.
Yeah. You see this kid here? This is a year later. The year before, when we were at this a different migrant work camp, his father brought him up to us, and two of his fingers just stuck together, you know. I'm serious, like two fingers were stuck together like this, and the skin was growing around it. And he basically said, "Can you do anything for my son? Because I want him to be able to use a computer at least, you know." And so again, I took him to, you know, this friend of mine, and he found people to do surgery on him. And so a year later, when I went to visit this camp, he had to come up and show me his finger, okay, you know, how they're separated. And, you know, so they like us. You notice, you know, the kids, they like us because we treat them well, you know, we don't, and they appreciate what we do for them. Next. Now, this is one of the, we also take down nursing students, like you said, and this is one of the, we went to the hospital there, and our students rotate through the hospital, and you see the Shriner of Northern California, they had to send this girl down there because they didn't know what she had, you know. They couldn't deal with it in Mexico, so they sent her to the Shriner Hospital in Northern California. Next, please. And this is another student, look at that. Yeah. This one here is more than just cleft, lip, and palate, okay? And you medical people, you see anything different here too? Look at that. Yeah, there's shunt from the brain, okay? So when we saw this, anyway, our students wanted to raise money to take care of this baby, okay? That's what happens when you get your students involved, you know, how they get involved and they see this and they say that we want to do something about this, you know what I mean? And so they wanted to raise money to have this girl worked on, and so they raised a little money, but then my friend, you know, he says they came up with the majority of the money, but our students just felt, you know, I just wanted the students to make them feel better that they could contribute as well. Yes.
Is that a white child, or is there something wrong with the skin?
Well, they're still young yet. You know, they're not exposed to sunlight, so. No, this is a Mexican. Maybe there's more Spanish, maybe more Spanish, okay. Yeah. Next. And that's one of the students here, and this picking up this. what our nursing students would do, we would go there and they would go there and pick up some of these little babies and just rock them around and sing to them, you know what I mean, make them feel better on a daily basis. And she was very happy. And then next.
When was that photo done?
What?
That photo, when was it?
Women, who was it?
Because that looks like one of the, Charlene, looks like
Sardines.
Charlene, one of the kids from our church in Watsonville. And she went to Ensenada. She's a doctor over there.
No, that's not her.
Student?
So this hygiene student, you see how the kids bond to our students? Okay, next. Yeah, they just love our students. That's our car here. The kids just, when you show kindness, they really bond to you. Next, please. This is inside an orphanage here, and we go visit the kids in the orphanage, and they just really attach to our students. We read to them and everything else. Okay, next. This outside orphanage, you could see my car trailer there. There's a compressor to run the dental units. Okay, next. And students read to them. Next. See how they bond? They just love our. Okay, next. And here we're getting ready to say goodbye here. Okay, so they're just going back to the poor area and just saying goodbye to everybody. Next. Okay, we're in another country now. Okay. By the way, is this the Morgan Valley Road?
Looks like clearly. That's before they got them paid.
We are in another country now. We are in the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, okay? And they really needed help down there. And so it's called Nicaragua. I heard of it before, Nicaragua. And so we were down there, and so the roads are kind of bad. And we actually had to get out of the car and push the car back on the road, the area, because it got stuck in the mud. It's just like, like I said, Morgan Valley, the road coming down. Too bad that, Jody and Judy's not here. Next. You look, people are just waiting there to be seen. Look how long the line is. Next, Nicaragua. And they're just waiting because they don't have enough. There aren't enough people to provide health care for them, number one. Number two, they cannot afford, private health care, and the country's not, they don't have the money to provide, health care to poor people, you know what I mean? So when we go there, then they feel just, you notice the people, they put on the best clothing when they go there to see us? Okay, next. And we have a dentist here working on the kid here. Next. And they let us use some of the hospitals to do dental work there, and this is a dentist here. And then,
Did you number the people?
pardon me?
Did you number the areas that you worked on?
Of course.
Okay, I didn't know, because some places they don't.
No, they inject them with lidocaine. I'm sorry that your dentist doesn't give you any injections.
Dentist gives it to me. I'm just wondering would they give me that?
Oh yeah, we don't, we do,
How do they,
lying
what do
down
they think
flat.
about the numb feeling on their lip and stuff?
they're fine, they're working fine enough. These are professional people, and what makes it nice is his wife is also a dentist, and they go together. And he did such a good job on her, and guess what? She insisted I take a photograph of them together, okay? She wanted to insist that she was so happy. And then we also, not just do dental, we also do eyeglass, okay? So can you imagine? Those of you that wear glasses, this machine costs over $27,000. This machine does the same job as something that you kind of set your, chest out and look. Yeah, but this thing here will tell us what type of glasses you need, okay? Next, please. And so we buy pre-made glasses, and we put them in big suitcases, and we haul them over there, okay? And then when we get there, we put them on the bench, and then so after they figure out what we need, and when they go there and they find the right prescription, they get glasses the same day because they can't manufacture it there. They can't afford it. Okay, next, so they get free glasses. Now we're back into dental here, and one of my former students, she was so impressed with it, she later on she became a dentist, okay. And he's a dentist from Santa Rosa. And good, okay. That's something to remove for it's working. And isn't this a nice picture?
Yeah.
Big brother is taking care of little sister while mama's being worked on. And nutrition problem, okay, you nurses, what's the issue here?
Spina bifida.
Right, spinal bifida. This is where people, what type of B vitamin? They're lacking a certain type of B vitamin, right? So we also do education like that, okay. So just amazing, this baby, the spinal cord could be just coming out of the spinal column. And just gives you another view. This poor baby could be paralyzed from here down, right? That's how sick it is. Now, we're right here. This building doesn't exist. This building just dysfunctional. This used to be a clinic many years ago, but it's closed. You see this here? So our group here, Rotary Club, we're here saying it's ridiculous. Can you imagine? If you need to have any medical care, you have to get into a boat and go for 4 hours by boat to go to a clinic. That's how bad it is. Ever got it? So we said, we got to do something about it. And hard to believe, but we were able to raise enough money to build a huge health center right here. Okay, so we're just looking at the site. So there's a health center here, health clinic here now, so people can go there and not go 4 hours by boat. Can you imagine that? Okay. And we ran into this guy. He's a Christian believer, right? And he says, he wore this to see us. He says, I love Jesus. And the program's not over yet, so you can't leave yet. Besides, there's no food left, so I just want to share a few things with you here. I could talk about all these things.
I have a question, Ezbon.
Yes.
During all that Vietnam, traveling and everything, when did you have time to meet Mrs. Jen?
To do what?
When did you have time to meet Mrs. Jen?
I was teaching at Loma Linda when I met her. Okay. So that was, I was teaching at Loma Linda School of Public Health, master's and the doctoral program for, I forgot how many years. I started there, I graduated in 1974. 4. Okay? And after they asked me to teach actually a year before I even graduated. And they said, well, just pay for your tuition. And so I was there for many years teaching and doing all these projects. And Loma Linda was, well, since you brought that up, after I came back from Vietnam, they realized I was kind of, I told you I had the lowest cholesterol level, right? And then they realized I was kind of, knew what I was doing, so they said, this is Loma Linda, okay? They said, we want to set up some clinics to help out some of the poor people in our area. So I was, pardon me? SAC. So I was one who was to set up these different, that was before we actually set them up, different locations, about 6 of them. And I had to find locations where we can rent, you know what I mean? And then I had to find nursing students and dental students and dental hygiene students and medical students to volunteer. Follow that? So that is good to get students involved, right? But these students cannot be on their own. Got it? So I had to what? Recruit dentists, nurses, and doctors to supervise these students. So these SAC clinics got our students involved with, like you can call it like missionary work, there in Loma Linda. Yes.
When we were doing SAC clinics when I was there, our supervising physician and nurse ended up married. He was a widower, she was a widow. And
Good place to meet, I guess. Well, at least we're doing common good work. I just want to keep on going here. We need to what? We need to serve our friends. The Bible says, can you imagine the type of friends that this person had? He had these friends that climbed the roof and opened up the roof and lowered him down so Christ could heal them. That's really service, isn't it? And then, and I already mentioned that we're created to serve because when we help other people, we also help ourselves, right? We increase our neurotransmitters, and we feel good about it. We're better. And then your parents may not want to hear this because it says, I wrote down here, parents need to teach their children to serve, help others, involve them in what? Providing services. An example would be my mother, mother and father. My mom, when we came back to this country, my father only had $100. So we have mother and father and 3 kids, okay? And so we ended up the Americans, the government paid us to go back to the Bay Area, but it's kind of where we went through the Panama Canal first. And then from New York, took a train all the way to the Bay Area. That's where my father's brother and sister were, okay? So we stayed with them until things settled down a little bit, and then my father says, I need to get back to Stockton. That's where where he had his business. He was a Chinese doctor, okay? And went back to Stockton and to start life over again with a wife and 3 kids. And so he went to one of his former patients, a white guy, realtor, and he said, can you find a cheap rental for us? And the realtor says, can you imagine one of his former patients The realtor says, I refuse to. Says, when you rent a place, you're just throwing money away. And my dad says, I don't have money to buy a house right now or make payments for a house. And he says, let me look around first. You want to hear how amazing people are? He was able to find a white dentist who owned a house full right, upright, full right. In other words, he owned the house. He had it for sale. And so he talked the dentist, and the dentist didn't mind. He talked the dentist into being the bank. So we bought this house, and then I would take a check to the dentist I used to walk there and deliver the check to him to make the payments. Even though they're white, okay, like I'm saying, they were prejudiced, but then not everybody was that way. So that kind of taught us to be more open-minded about things and appreciate what people do. And then so we bought this house. So my parents bought this house, couldn't afford a car because they didn't have very much money. So the house made my father very happy because the house was about six blocks away from the Stockton State Hospital. That's for mentally ill people, okay? Not Napa State. Napa State's for criminally insane, okay? But Stockton State was just for just mentally ill people, okay? And so he worked there. And then my mom, that wasn't enough. Then my mom would work as a field worker, go out and pick vegetables for a Chinese farmer there in the Bay Area. And she was allowed to glean, after work. They allow her to pick up some fruit, some vegetables, and bring it home to live on, okay. And then my mother, after a while, she didn't have to do that, okay. And she on season when the cherry season, she would pack the cherries in the little right containers and everything else, and she was so good at it that, can you imagine? Her supervisor we didn't have a car. The supervisor actually came up and picked her up and took her to work, and she was such a good worker. Then later on, she just started taking care of kids, and didn't charge them very much because some of these people had to work, so she just took care of the kids. And then while we're living in this house, my father taught me, because he's a civil engineer, but he never was able to work as an engineer because he was Chinese American and they wouldn't hire Chinese Americans. The state wouldn't hire, that's when they had the Chinese Exclusion Act, okay? And so to make us feel better, what he did was the basement of the house, he taught me how to hook up wires and hook up, plumbing and everything else. My wife doesn't realize that, but I don't know how to do that anymore, but she still insists that I do that. So my father did that shows you an example. My father he helped translate for the Chinese Americans there, that were new and they couldn't speak English, can't read English. So he did free translation. He went there and helped fill out forms for them and actually translated for them. And then my parents became, among the Chinese community, very well respected, even though they didn't have very much money, but they were still very well respected. And my mother, she would take care of, sometimes people have to go to work and they'd leave the baby with my mom, and mom would take care of them, and not charge them that much. And then the other thing was, like I said, my dad taught me how to do this electrical and plumbing and stuff. And so when somebody in the Chinese community didn't have a lot of money, and they said, there's something wrong with our electrical, whatever. And my mother they would call my mother, and my mother said, okay, you know how to find this place, right? And my first vehicle was some of you may remember, you older people, red wagon. I'd put all the tools in this red wagon, and I would walk this thing to this person's house and fix whatever needs to be fixed. And then before I would go, my mom would remind me. She would say, if they want to give you money, don't take anything from them, because they can't really afford to give you money. But don't take any money from them. And she said, if you really need something bad, I'll try to come up with it, but don't take any money from these folks. So I never took money from people that needed help. So my mother was a good example for that. And so I enjoy working on that, helping other people. And so I appreciate what our church does. We help a lot of other people, and one thing I'm just, before I end, I want two areas I want to talk about. One is I still remember the president of the JC says, Ezbon, I would like you to be that advisor for our local chapter of National Honor Society. I said, okay. I never say no to him because he always very helpful. I said, okay, I'll do that. He says, they're not too organized right now. So I became the advisor to the National Honor Society there at JC. And I still remember one day we were walking on the campus, and one student said, I can't really afford to eat lunch. And I said, why? He says, I don't have any money. And then another time, wasn't very far, maybe another week, I heard another student said, I won't be able to eat dinner. And I said, why? I don't have any money. And so I said to myself, this is ridiculous. How can you be a good student and don't have any food and you can't nourish yourself? Do you realize there are students that don't have access to food or very much food? Mm-hmm. So I said to myself, we have an account with our honor society. Why don't we buy food with this, okay? And then we can give it to our students. So what I did was, you heard of the Redwood Empire Food Bank before in Santa Rosa? Yeah. So what I would do is I would drive out there with check out a van from the college, and I'd drive out there and they fill up the van, and I would drive the van back to the college, and by that time my students have set up a couple tables, and then they would unload it and put all the food there, and then students can come by and pick up the food. We don't check their ID or anything, And so we just did this for several months, and then the Student Body Association said, we need to increase this more. And so they were able to raise some money so that there could be another day for food giveaway for our students. Okay. Then after about a year, guess what? The college realized how much these students needed food on a regular basis, that they basically, with courtesy, they took over the program. In other words, this college actually bought the food, okay? They bought the food and it was open every day, and they would give the food away to students that needed the food. So you see just getting an example going, we only did it on a small basis, but when you try to do something good, the Lord will bless you to help other people. And then I have one more item here. God didn't just create human beings, right? God created other, I call them creatures, right? And is your puppy here today?
No.
Yeah, the puppy's there. Very good. I just want to tell this. My mother's birthday is St. Patty's Day, okay? Not too far away. And one day, right? And I tell people that, and they said, really? I said, yeah, I'm part Irish too, Of course I'm not. I know. And the day after my father died, okay, in Stockton, that was many years ago, I really felt cheated because I graduated with my doctorate degree in 1974, and I wanted him to be at my graduation, but he died on 1972, 2 years before, okay, I felt real cheated there. But anyway, the day after my father died, my mother, was living by herself there, and she opened the door one day, and there was a puppy sitting right in front of the door, and she said, "The Lord must have sent him." And came in, and he became family. He was, and I don't know who came up with the name. My sister probably. His name is Snoopy. Okay.
Right.
So they became the best friends. Okay, he kept my mother, company, and my sister would visit her too on a regular basis. But at least Snoopy would be there for my mother, 24 hours a day. They were the best of friends. And just want to say that in Santa Rosa, or in Sonoma County, they have a place called Canine Companions.
Oh, yeah.
You heard of that?
Yeah.
So it's really good. It's really therapeutic. Okay, you could actually check out a dog, and it could be your friend. And then now I also tell my students and other folks, I said, if you feel a little bit, you feel like you're getting a little bit down, go to the local Humane Society and check out a dog and just walk them around the compound. You would feel better. And guess what? It works. Okay? So, I hope I didn't take too much of your time, but I just want to share with you. It's to serve, okay? I really like this sign up there. Come to worship and leave to serve.
That was Mr. Abella.
Pardon me?
Mr. Abella.
Dr.
He was one
Agrella.
of the deacons here.
Or Arbella. Okay. Arbella, yeah. Yeah, I can't remember.
His first name.
So, shall we pray? Father in heaven, thank you that we can gather together as a family and share your love. Thank you that we can come here and serve, learn to serve in our community. Thank you for the examples your son has shown, and it's hard to believe that he was willing to die for us and leave the. We can't wait until you come back so we can spend eternity thanking you and your son for being so kind to us and so loving. Be with our brothers and sisters here and protect them and watch over them. Praise this in your son's name. Amen.